Listen, it probably back in the day, you didn't have to be as much of a jack of all trades.
Right.
There's no getting around it now. You have to be able to do a little bit of everything.
Welcome to the Next Level Journalist, where you will hear from some of the best journalists in the business or who have been there, done that, and willing to share with you what they've learned so you can get better, faster.
My guest is someone that I've known since 2012 when I worked at WLEX TV. She was the main sports anchor. I was the weekend sports anchor. She's done news, she's done sports, she's worked at the local level, she's worked at the network level. Mary Jo Perino, thank you so much for making time for this today.
Anything for you, Kyle.
Well, again, I just gave us a Cliff Notes version of what you've done, but you tell us, give us a rundown, if you will, of when this first started for you, what got you interested, and just up to date.
I got out of college in '99, so a whole different century, which seems crazy, and started out in Terre Haute, Indiana, which I'm sure that you have talked about before on this exact series. You kind of got to be willing to go where the jobs are, and you might have to go to a small town you'd never heard of before. I'd never heard of Terre Haute, Indiana before I applied for a job there. Started out as a news reporter, was there for 3 years, and then eventually did news and sports, got a sports job in Lexington, doing the job you did. I was the weekend anchor there, and then went to CNN headline news when they were still doing sports. If you've seen CNN lately, you haven't seen a whole lot of sports on there, so you know that it isn't a thing anymore. So they kind of did away with the sports department, came back to WLEX as the main anchor in 2007 and stayed for 6 years doing that, and then took a break from TV and then ended up back. I never saw it coming. I was doing some like guest co-hosting maybe once a week on Hey Kentucky, which was a show that kind of discussed everything, hot topics, sports, politics, you name it. And then, some changes with that show happened, and I kind of slid into the full-time chair there. And so I've been back on LEX since 2016 doing that.
And I love that story. I mean, just how you got out of it. And I know how passionate you were when you were in the business, when we worked together and you had to get out of the business. And I'm a big believer in that, God had a plan and he rewarded you for, what you put first and then delivered it back to you. I don't think that's a mistake, at all. So good for you to be back, in the hot seat, if you will, for everyone to see. And another thing I appreciate when we worked together was you were not above doing everything. It's so easy for people, because I worked with you being the third female. I worked with 2 females prior to, and one of the things that they always got was like, where's your camera boy, or where's your camera guy, insinuating that you're not capable of it. But you were not only capable, but you were never above that. So I always appreciate that you set the example for everyone. Like, look, I might be the main sports person, but I do everything, and it set the example for everyone else to follow. And I feel like that's kind of what you have to do in this business. And
listen, my husband. That's how I met my husband. I was shooting a high school basketball game, and that's where I met him. He wasn't a high school player. But,
thank you for clarifying.
But yeah, listen, it probably back in the day, you didn't have to be as much of a jack of all trades.
Right.
There's no getting around it now. You have to be able to do a little bit of everything.
Talk about some of the challenges that you faced in the business, because I know you were at CNN for a year, and that wasn't just by chance that you came back to LEX TV, and that's just the only challenge that I know of. So talk about the challenges that you faced and how you overcame them.
I feel like the biggest challenge as a female is not necessarily, at least for me, I'm just basing it on my experience. I think the opportunities are 100% there now, compared to maybe what it used to be 15, 20, 30 years ago. For sure, the opportunities have increased. And I am so guilty of this myself to this day, and I hate that I do it. But as soon as a woman comes on, my immediate reaction is to judge her appearance. Mm. And you just don't do it with guys. You just don't. And part of it, I'm sure, is because there's really one uniform for men. They've got a suit and tie. Like, it can't, you might have a bad tie, but you don't, and women have a huge variety of wardrobe choices, hairstyle choices. And it is just, that's always been my biggest challenge. I just watched myself this morning, and it's all I could do to think was critique the way I looked. Mm-hmm. I hate that. I hate that I do it to myself. I hate that I do it to other women. But I've definitely had more conversations than I have ever wanted to with news directors, news managers about the way I look. And I get it. It's a visual business. But it's never stopped my ability to do the job and to do the job well. But that's always been the biggest challenge for me, struggling with weight issues. I've gone through 2 pregnancies, being on the air, and that kind of stuff. That has always been my biggest challenge, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. And not just that you're on TV, but you're covering sports, and so you're already under a microscope.
You have to know your stuff. But there's plenty of males that have never played football that talk about football.
Yeah, I've never played organized football, but that doesn't, people wouldn't disqualify me from doing sports, but they would automatically judge you on that.
Yeah, because they know already. Right. She's never played a down of football. Obviously. Right. No, I haven't, but neither have half of my male counterparts.
Right.
But that doesn't stop you from knowing and being able to study film and study games, and and as you know, and as you've done so well, the story isn't necessarily the game.
Right.
Athletes are people, and in the last 6 months, I think that's maybe become more apparent than ever, that they have stories, they have families, they have lives outside of their careers. And you've always been great at finding those stories and telling those stories. And I think that shouldn't dispel anyone from doing this job because they never were an athlete.
Right.
Or never played the game before. You don't need to have, nobody says you've never performed a brain surgery before, so you can't possibly be qualified to do a story on a brain surgeon.
Right.
But there are plenty of times where people say, oh, she's never played football. Right. Not just to me, but to anybody,
right.
To any female that's covering the game. And it's not a necessity to have played the game to cover it and cover it well.
When I worked with Krista Lander in Texas, and then Amanda McCall in Huntington, and then you in Lexington, I saw firsthand just the daily, and especially this day and age when everybody has access to you through social media. I couldn't imagine the daily criticism, I guess would be the right word. I mean, we are all, like I said, able to be reached through social media now, but females more than anybody. I saw it firsthand, so it's an unfortunate part of the job for women, sadly.
It is, and I think we all know it's coming.
Yeah.
And but nobody takes the time to get on Twitter and say, you know what, you looked fantastic tonight.
Right.
But they do take the time to say, you know what's wrong with your hair, and you look fat.
Yeah.
And are you pregnant? Yeah. All of that.
Again, you worked at the network level. You work and have worked in the local level as well, and you are again. Talk about the differences that you've experienced in both.
Well, I would 100% say working at the network level, and again, just in my experience, was 100 times easier than working at the local level. Because you do have a support staff. You do have, you know, producers that are working with just you, not doing a whole newscast on their own. You've got hair and makeup people. You just kind of have to show up and do the job. At the local level, especially in the smaller markets, man, it can kick your butt for, you know, and you're not reaping some big financial rewards from that either. It is so much harder than anyone who's never done it can ever imagine. It is so many more hours to produce something that takes 3 minutes. To put that together is so much harder than people realize. And now it's even more difficult, I think, because everything changes in 5 minutes.
In an instant,
And it's not every single day, but there are a lot of days where, you know, the Big Ten's not playing football. The Big Ten is playing football. They're starting, you know, it's just craziness that you cannot, it's not, what I always appreciated was when I started, it was one of those jobs where when I went home at the end of the day, I kind of left work at the station.
Right.
You didn't, you know, it wasn't like a job where I had to go home and be on the computer and, you know, typing up reports or anything like that. I could kind of leave my work at the station. That is no longer something that you can do as a sports reporter, sports anchor. You are truly on call 24/7. Because things happen. And if you are not on top of it or part of it, or even if you're not breaking the story, if you're not chiming in with, you know, with information, you lose your audience because they're going to go where they know they're going to get it. So you just can't let up.
What advice were you given early on, or even today? Anything that stands out to you that you've kind of, you know, cling to, kept with you over the years about this business? And hey, whether it was a mentor or someone that you worked with, anything that comes to mind that, you know, what advice you've been given that you can share here to help other people?
I think don't do it the way you see someone else do it. Don't try to be somebody else. I think authenticity is so often lost in this world where people try to either sound like someone else. And definitely you should take things from other people and learn, but develop your own style. And that shouldn't take that much time, because you should have, if you have a sense of who you are, talk like that. Don't talk like a Ron Burgundy TV news anchor. Just talk. Just remember that these are telling stories, they're conversations. You're trying to connect with someone that you're not in the same room with. And only when you are authentically you, I think, does that come across as something that people want to watch. And I think when I first started, it was really easy to say, I want to be like Linda Cohn, or, you know, someone that I would see on TV at the national level. And I think that I got better when I just was like, okay, this is how I talk in real life. So this is how I'm going to talk on TV. I'm not going to change the way I communicate because the camera's on. And I think that's the most important thing.
And you do such a great job of that. I've picked that, like, anyone that's not seen Mary Jo, you know, Google her or YouTube or whatever this is what she sounds like, except for that cough right there. She figured
You're right.
but
Sometimes that happens too.
this is who you are on TV. And I notice, and I know you do too, but like if you watch the news, people put on their news voice, whatever that sounds like, get serious. Or for those people, you know, what can you tell them? Like, look, this is how you find it, or is it repetition? Or how did you find your voice? And just be you.
I think it is repetition. I think, you know, sometimes the nerves come on when the light goes on, and that can't be helped sometimes. You really have to remember that, or at least it helped me to just be like, there's no one else, there's no one even looking at me doing this.
Right.
You know, if you focus on, oh, there might be 10,000 people watching me right now.
Right.
You just can't do that. It's got to be one person.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes repetition. I never did the looking in the mirror thing. That did not work for me, where I would, you know, pretend I was doing something. But I watched myself a lot. I work with a guy now, Keith Farmer, who says he never, ever watches himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's whatever works for you. I watch myself religiously, and it sounds a little maybe egotistical. I don't know, but I feel like that's how you get better. You're your own worst critic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're your own worst critic. And if I notice something that I'm doing, and sometimes it's subconscious, and I've been doing it for 20 some years, and I still find things. Like I watched an interview I did the other day, and I just had my shoulders up like this for no reason. I don't know why. And I watched it back, and I'm like, that looks weird. I don't know why I did that. But I think it's important to watch yourself. But like looking into the mirror and talking, that never did anything for me.
I want you to think about before, because I'm going to basically reiterate what you said, but think about what you did to develop your skill set. But in the meantime, I just want to, you know, let people know I did the same thing, and I don't particularly like how I sound. So I picked up tendencies, just like you said. Why did I do that? Or if I used to say a certain phrase or a word more, like, why am I saying that word so frequently? I don't even use it in common speak. So you pick up things, even if, again, I wasn't a huge fan of actually seeing and hearing my voice. Still not to this day, but it's a little different because you can get better. At least that's been my experience. So with that said, on top of watching yourself back, were there other, you know, things, little hacks, if you will, that help develop whatever skill? It doesn't necessarily have to be in front of the camera, but any skill set.
Well, I had to ask for help a lot because, you know, as you mentioned, like shooting and editing, I wasn't like skilled in that at all when I started working. Like I didn't have that skill.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking people to help you is big time.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot, you know, people will help you. People will help if you ask. If you don't ask, and then they just come up and say, your video looks terrible last night. Okay. But before you go out and shoot, ask to make sure you know what the steps are. Do I white balance? Do I have to, all of those things? And I don't even, you know, cameras are so good now that some of that stuff is gone. Some of that stuff is so automated now. But I definitely think asking for critiques is a big thing. Find someone you trust, someone who will be honest. You and I both worked with someone who was never afraid to tell you what he thought, which sometimes, you know, it's a double-edged sword. You'd sometimes hate it, but then you'd be like, well, maybe he might have been right about that. And I hate that he was right about it, but I do think you have to accept certain criticisms the same way that you would accept praise.
Right.
And take them both constructively and use them. But I definitely think you need to ask for help.
Yep, no doubt. And just to, so Alan Cutler, who she's referring to, he's been on here before
Oh,
too.
you figured that out. You got that, huh?
Yeah, that one wasn't a tough one. He used to drive me nuts. I would take my story, thought it was a piece of art, and then he would chop like 30 seconds off. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, but it made me so much better. Once I got past my own pride
Yeah.
and, took that advice, like, I grew, immensely when I was at LAX 18 with you guys. That's when my storytelling really started to sharpen because I was getting so much feedback and critique, and whether I liked it or not, it was going to get me better. So hopefully people are taking that advice that you're giving to ask and be open to that feedback, because it is going to get you better. If you could go back in time with all that said and tell your younger self something about, this business and how to succeed and how to avoid certain failures or trials, what would you tell your younger self?
That is such a good question, and one that I was not prepared for.
I did not give Mary Jo the questions beforehand. Those tend to be
No.
the best answers because you don't have time to think about it. That's
Right.
been my experience.
I would probably tell myself to not sweat the small stuff and be okay with to really understand. And this is not just for the job, just in life in general.
Right.
Stuff's going to get thrown your way that's going to throw you for the biggest loop. And while you're in it, it feels so like you don't know what's going to happen, but just
Yep.
trust that it's happening for a reason. I mean, I was devastated when I got laid off at CNN because I really thought I had made it.
Mm-hmm.
And, next step was ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't make that happen, and it ended up being the best thing for me. That's what I would probably tell myself is like, you don't have to end up at ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
That would be awesome. And if you make it, I think I could have done it. I know I could have done it if that was the way that I chose to pursue life. Like I know that I could do the same job that they are doing.
Yeah.
At that level.
Yeah. I love hearing that. Go ahead. I'm not going to cut you off. Go ahead.
But don't be disappointed that that's not where you ended up.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're making less money probably, but you're still doing the exact same thing they're doing.
Right.
What they do at ESPN, what they do at CBS Sports, that's what you do. That's what I do.
Yeah.
The other thing I would have told myself is maybe try to see what play-by-play or color would have been like. I know I couldn't do it, right? And if someone asked me to call a game, 100% I would fail miserably. That is so much harder than it looks.
Yeah.
So much harder than it looks. And as a woman, I kind of never, it's just kind of now that we're seeing women other than sideline reporters,
Yep.
be it color commentary or calling games. And I kind of wish that I would have maybe tried my hand at that, at a smaller level, doing, high school games or something, just to see if I could do it and get better, because that is a skill that I do not possess. And it seems so fun, but it's so hard.
Yeah.
That has to be the most difficult job in sports, is being a play-by-play announcer and having it seem seamless.
Effortlessly. Yeah, I'm with you. What I want to point out, like, I love what you said. Like, I was so excited when you said basically, like, life was happening for you rather than to you when you lost that CNN job, because, I just look back and think, wow, if you were to went on to that, and I'm sure you've thought about it before, think about the things that wouldn't have happened. Everything from your opportunities now at work, but your family, that's pretty exciting. So if people can take that and really approach not just the business, but life that way, that it's happening for you. There's a reason behind it. It doesn't feel like it at the time. But you certainly exemplified that to the T. So that was pretty cool.
The older you get, the easier it is to look back and realize, oh yeah, that set me up for this.
Yeah.
That set me up for putting this person in my life or that person in my life. And yeah, it's hard in the moment to know that that's what's going on and to trust it sometimes. But that's it. It'll all work out the way it's supposed to work out. You've got to trust the process.
MJ, is there anything else that you want to add? Because I want to respect your time here, but is there anything else that you want to add that you'd like to talk about, whether it be advice for an aspiring journalist or whatever comes to mind that you think, you know what, I need to get this off my chest so somebody can know this, anything in general that you want to share that I didn't ask you about today?
So especially for young people that are starting out, enjoy it, because it goes by so fast, and I feel like you're always just trying to make that next step and that next move and put a tape together, get here, get there. And financially, you kind of do have to do that, because you can't really survive on the paycheck at a tiny market for your whole life. That can be kind of tough. But my best friends to this day are people that I met when I was 22 doing this job, because you spend so much time together. People become your family, and you're all kind of going through stuff together. So really, take the time to make those relationships. Also, you never know, this business is so small that you never know when one of your people that you knew in Bumsville, Montana, ends up being in Cleveland, and there's a job opening in Cleveland now. This business is very small. So always keep that in mind. Don't irritate people, don't burn bridges if you don't have to, because there have been opportunities that I've gotten just because I knew someone who knew someone. And so definitely keep that in mind. They're probably my best advice. And just be true to yourself. Be authentic.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said it. You're the first person that talked about how small this business really is, because it is wild how, I know people all around the country who knew somebody else that I worked with, and some of them work together now. And it's like, well, I worked with her in Huntington. I worked with him in Lexington. Now they work together in Houston. It's like, what? How does that work? But that's the reality of it. So another piece.
I mean, you and I both know people who are in Houston, Cincinnati, the network. I have two guys that interned for me. One that's in Cincinnati right now, Jeremy Rao.
Yep.
He's been at the Fox station there for 10 years. He interned with me.
Yeah.
I had another.
He worked with Chris DeLander, who I was in Texas with. They worked together in Illinois. So.
Yeah. That's how it is. So, Ian Oliver is in Tampa. Yep. We know people in the biggest markets everywhere.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of just where life takes you. But this business is very small. You could probably name any state, any major market, and we know someone who's been there or is there.
Yeah, somehow. I mean, that proximity, that's a real thing. You get in that network of people, and that can help bring you up the ladder, so to speak, as long as you don't burn that bridge, like you say.
Goodness, Nikki Burdine, who you anchored with forever. She's been in DC. Now she's a morning anchor in Nashville. You know what I mean? It's great. It's great. I love seeing people, living their dreams doing it and being successful at it too. So
yeah, no doubt. And like I said, exciting for you and your crew, as you guys are now the official UK station. So, anyone watching this, all you have to tune in is the Fox Sports now. You'll see
Yes.
MJ all across the country covering those Cats.
I mean,
You
big
hate them
time.
or love them, but they're going to be at the top every year. Sorry. So
I know, and football are so much better. So
yeah,
it's fun.
Well, MJ, I appreciate your time, and I hope to do this again soon.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate you. Take care.
And thank you for checking out this channel. If you found this content beneficial, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share it with someone you think might find it beneficial as well, because this channel was simply started and created to serve you, to help others grow, to learn how other successful TV journalists do or did it. So take what serves you so you can get better faster and reach your next level.